Cool. Thanks everyone for joining. This is our Think Big meeting. Happens every 2 weeks for the package team. We have one, two, three items on the agenda, and it seems like it'll take a while. So let's jump right in. Steve, do you want to kick off the meeting?
Sure. So this was something that I identified a week or two ago. I had the realization that when using the project level package registry, so you set your remote to a given project ID. Um, with the existing package managers we have, specifically Maven and NPM, Conan not so much. Um, we have the ability to just push packages to a project without having to have any sort of naming restriction or any sort of connection to the whatever code is in that project at all whatsoever. And so there's that example project that I have up there called the package registry project, where I didn't push any code, but I published a handful of packages from various projects, none of which were even pushed to GitLab. Um, and that was just sort of like an interesting epiphany of like, is this useful? Should we do something with this? And I thought it'd be worth discussing. Does everyone kind of understand what I did?
Maybe you could walk us through the project and show us how it works.
Yeah. So on the project, so there's no code or anything. But if you go to the packages list page, you'll see that there's, I think, 6 different packages pushed. So I've got 2 versions of an NPM package called alert package, and then another NPM package called NPM publish test. There's a Maven practice. Well, there's a few different Maven packages that are from various places with different names. And so those are all completely different packages from different code bases. And all I did was, like for example, NPM, I went into the project, added the publish config and pointed it to this project, updated my NPM RC with my auth token, and then pushed it. I did NPM publish, and here it is. And pretty much the same deal with Maven. So Maven, I updated the, I think it's the POM XML file, if I'm remembering correctly, and pushed it to this location. And so that kind of just is an interesting idea of like, I could create a project that's maybe a public project like this, and it's not actually a project in any way, but it's pretty much acting as my registry for all of my public packages if I wanted it to. Or I could create a private project and push all of my packages that I want to be private, and they will all be seen as sort of like private packages. And one of the sort of use cases that I kind of had talked a little bit about with Tim was someone could conceivably set up a pipeline that automatically publishes packages from other projects to a private project. So like something like this, where all of the packages live, it's private, only 1 or 2 people maybe can access it. And those are the people that have the authority to like validate or verify a given package. And then once they've done that, they could maybe kick off a pipeline from here, and then it publishes the same package to a public project or an internal project that the rest of a company or team has access to. And then the rest of the company just has to have that one remote to that internal project, and then they get access to their entire company's worth of packages. There's some like interesting permission things there, because it's not quite as granulated as if each individual package was in a separate project. But assuming that, company A wants all of their internal packages to be available internally, like they could do something like this.
I think, okay, so you had me, sorry, Nico, you had me with the project, and you're pushing these packages here, and it's a private project, but then I got lost. How would you do it moving them to a public project, because you have all these individual projects that are building these packages and publishing them here. How would they then get published to a public project where you share them? Would you have to change all this?
I mean, I haven't like done this yet. So, but there would be some sort of another CI job somewhere, either in the original project or maybe somehow tied into this project, that allows the sort of like the admin users of the packages to publish them to another place. If that makes sense. Like I'm not exactly sure how it would work, but I feel like it's something we could do.
Steve, did you actually try to pull them again down with a package manager? Because I'm afraid that due to the mismatch of scope, then you will not be able to pull them down. You can pull them up because that's a different mechanism, but the pull down actually relies on the package name. And so the scope will be off. I'm not sure
about that.
though.
I'm trying to think with NPM, so with NPM, I think it would still work. I should test that. It's a good point. Because I believe the way NPM works is it will find, so this is under the S. Abrams namespace. So it will find all packages in the S. Abrams namespace, and then it will find the package that has the same name. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the project itself.
Okay, so if that's true, we may want to consider to touch the documentation, because I was going through this recently because I'm trying to have actually a pipeline that publish some of my my open source stuff inside our registry, and we clearly state that the package should have the scope is the group or the user and then the name of the package there.
Right.
So I don't know if there is a bug in the documentation or if we like it that is hidden this way, but we clearly state that in the docs.
Well, and I don't think, I mean, because you wouldn't be able to break those rules. Like I would only be able to create packages that have S. Abrams as their scope in this case, for NPM at least. For Maven, it's as you can see, it's very wide open. There is no nothing like that unless you were doing it at the instance level. And so if it was something like GitLab org, where there's a bunch of subgroups and subpackages, as long as the scope was at GitLab org, I believe it, like, I'm pretty sure I'd have to double check that it would be able to find the package based on that top level namespace, because that's currently how that naming restriction is set up.
But
What?
Go ahead, Nico, you got it.
No, just at least for NPM, I think the scope is the part that is defined with the at. So when you do add foo/buds, that's what NPM think is a scope, right?
Yep.
But in our case, we will be like prefixing it with the like S. Abrams or whatever test group, correct? But this means that there can be your registry with add foo/buds and my registry with add foo/buds, right? Is this okay in all the cases?
So yes, so that can happen, but if you tried to publish, because that's the same package name, so if you tried to publish the same package name within the same scope, you would receive an error saying that that you can't do that because it already exists.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think we should do next with this information, Steve? Like, how can we? What's like the GitLab-y iterative thing that we could do to try and move this forward?
Well, I mean, first I'll check to make sure that I can install things as I expect. But assuming that works, I guess we just kind of have to decide whether or not we need to like validate if this is useful in some way. Like it seems kind of like a shortcut to creating sort of like group level and instance level registries, which I don't know if that's useful or not. I think that's worth validating.
So I can jump in here a little bit. I think that group level and instance level view And organization is something that our users are looking for, especially at the larger sized organizations. They would like to be able to say, this is our official registry of all packages. And then the project level package registry seems more like these are the packages needed to function at the project level. And then it goes out to that shared group. So I think there is definitely a use case. I'm wondering if there's a way that we can iterate towards a really elegant solution. Just from the usability standpoint of having like a project that is devoted to being a registry kind of feels, I'm gonna steal a little bit of Haley's language, but it looks a little hacky. And we want to make sure that if we're offering that, it is in a good way. So I'm wondering if we're so close, there's a way to like take it and just move it like an inch, and then it'll be that really robust experience. But I can validate that it's something they're looking for.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's fairly hacky, but like the thing that made me think was that like in reality, unless a package is built by a pipeline, there is no connection between a package and project at all, like ever, except for the fact that the package record might have a project ID connected to it. But that still technically doesn't matter, because as you can see here, all 6 of these packages are attached to this project, but they don't have to do with what the project has to do with. So
if I could talk about the UX a bit, I think it's not necessarily bad right now. I think we could eventually smooth it out. I think it would be valuable to document this and advertise it, and then see like what people's workflow actually is when they are using that, and then we'll have a better understanding of what actually needs to be done to make this more of a first class kind of experience rather than something that kind of happens to work.
And the other thing that I was going to mention before I forget of where this could be useful is, so we have a lot of like naming restrictions at the instance level, which we want to eventually kind of work through and fix. But this kind of proves that if I have code in a different place on GitLab or on GitHub or on a completely different area and want to move my packages to GitLab, but don't want to worry about like, how am I going to have to rename these? Am I going to have to do something else? I can just change my remote on my existing code and push the package to GitLab and then worry about the rest later. So it could be kind of like a simple first step to help with that migration process to an extent, because it's not dependent on the code living in the same place at the same time.
Yeah, great point, Haley. I think documenting this and showing it off, like if we could put in our documentation, how do you set up your own project as a private registry or something like that, or like example workflows, and we walk through people how to do it, how to create their pipelines, how to pull down the packages. I think that would be really useful to start, and then we can get feedback from people saying this worked, this didn't work, or this is missing. Maybe the step before that is for us, like you said, just to test pulling it down into like a quick workflow diagram that we could all view and wrap our heads around of like, you have many projects and subgroups, but here's your repository project. And then here's how you pull and push things, how it works logically. I think that would really help. It would help me at least.
A question. So you said that if there is a clashing namespace and package name, the registry would refuse the upload of new package, right? You're mute, Steve.
That's true for NPM.
Yeah. So if we advertise this, can we actually generate a way where if I want Steve to not publish any package, I just go on my registry and programmatically, because I can do that with 2 lines of code, publish dummy packages with all the names that I know that he used, and it's not able to use our registry anymore?
Well, but you have to remember, because it's within the scope of your group. So you own your group, or your company owns your group. And so unless there's someone that's trying to troll you in your own company, that wouldn't happen.
But do we instantiate a registry for every group? No, it's one global registry, right?
Yes.
And so if npm names thing add foo_baz, it doesn't matter in which scope it is. The name of the package, the ID is add foo_baz, isn't it?
Yeah, the package the entire name is at foo_baz, so no one else can create at foo_baz,
No
but
matter
someone
the
can
scope.
create at bar_baz. That's not a problem.
Yeah, but so the reason why I'm talking about this because I see this kind of bickering happening with other packages. So say that you have your organization foo, right?
Mhm.
And your competitor baz, and now I'm publishing all my at foo under my baz, and it completely block you to publish packages, right? This can happen.
Yeah, that's correct for npm, and
Yeah.
that's something that we want to fix with npm by properly setting up the project, group, and instance level remotes. Right now, that is not set up on npm at all. So like with Maven, you could have different remotes for different projects. So at the same company, one project can have a package foo_baz, and another project can also have the same package foo_baz. And so that's due to the project level aspect. npm is sort of this outlier where the naming restrictions are kind of like very specific to npm right now, and we do want to change that. And there's an issue somewhere for creating the proper project and instance level endpoints.
So the question is, with this, do we want still to advertise this, or is better to just keep it under wrap or not? I don't want to like chime against it. I just want to lay it out that we may generate more problem than solve.
We've got like, if anyone sat through the iteration office hours by Sid, there was a really strong push to just document it. And we're an open source company, you can read our code. And the fact that no one's figured this out and they aren't using this, we shouldn't be like hiding it to avoid the chance that someone might have problems with the thing that's there. I'm not suggesting that we go and say, hey, everyone, this is a perfect thing. You know, it could just be an MVC to say, look, this is a thing that's possible for people that think they might want to use it. Please give us feedback. And that would be in the form of documentation. That seemed like a good first step here. Do you agree with that, Tim, in terms of the iteration value, or not so much? Because I could be overstepping it there a bit.
I'm always a fan of iteration and low level of shame. I think it's really important GitLab values.
So that would be just describe that this is a thing, maybe in a way that you've set it up, Steve. Let people know that it's possible. Let people know that there's a chance that there could be conflicts and problems with the package naming, and there could be problems in that way. But for organizations where this works, we immediately provide a feature that's kind of viable, and then we figure it out from there. And to agree with Haley on that front as well.
And just to be clear, the naming conflicts don't have to do with this. The naming conflicts exist regardless of where you publish them. So with NPM, if I publish to one project, that's S. Abrams, and the project is foo, and I publish package baz, and then I go and publish to another project and try to publish baz, like I can't do that. Even if it's like 5 subgroups down, I cannot have the same package name currently. So it doesn't have to do with where you publish it at all.
My question is, did you have any code changes to make this work?
No, this is currently available.
So like, you know, we can look at it and say, how do we make this better? And I think we should, because it's obviously, I mean, I expect to have people go, oh yeah, I'll do everything in there, and then something catches fire. But if it's still there, like trying to hide it is weird to me. It doesn't feel very GitLab-y to sort of like try and keep a secret about how someone could be using the product in a way that's valuable to them, right? That's my opinion, and I don't, as manager pants, I don't feel like my opinion has any more weight than anyone else's here. So I'm happy to have disagreements around that. But that's kind of my sense of this. Let's communicate it sooner rather than later.
Cool. I'll add a note to create some docs for it. And the other thing that kind of like spurred me is like last week we did the round robin with Ian's designs, and like once I kind of set this project up, I realized like this is pretty much that page without all the features, where it just lists all of the projects. That one's more automatic. It finds all of the projects within a given group, whereas this one's like I personally pick which projects are or packages are in this list. But it seemed like a similar looking page, which I thought was interesting.
So
This is
oh, go ahead, Aaron.
this is related to migration, to having this kind of thing work as a bridge from people moving off package managers to us, isn't it? I just want to make sure we're like making sure that's linked, because I think that's an important step.
I'll definitely be sure to add that note to the docs.
So what are the next steps for this one? Do we need to create an issue? Do we mentioned docs, we mentioned charts, or like, you know, a flow diagram? What do you think is the smallest thing that we could do to move us forward?
I think docs makes the most sense. Just kind of explain like, here's this thing you can do with our feature. If it's useful, let us know.
And if we create a demo video, we could share it we could post it to Unfiltered, and we could get feedback on it on YouTube. Like that might even be a shorter path. Like just we could record a video, you and I, of you walking me through how you set this up and why it's useful, and a couple of example use cases. That could be like a good first step, and maybe it'll clarify the documentation we have to write too. Do you want me to schedule some time for us to go through that example and record it, and then we could do the docs after that?
Yeah, that sounds good. I should probably have time either by the end of this week or early next week.
Okay. Add it up to my list. Thanks, Steve. I really like that idea. It's really helpful, and thanks for bringing that forward. So we have two more items on the agenda. I added one to talk about metrics. So in the past several months, we've seen steady growth. We're looking at page views for package and the container registry. They're steadily going up, but it's also making it clear that we need more and better metrics to make decisions. Still feels like we're in the phase where where we're measuring adoption and usage, but ideally we get to the point where we can launch a feature like the Docker tag expiration policies, and the next milestone we'll know, did people use this? Where did they get stuck on? Is there something that we can improve? Or do we need more data and go back and forth? So we are still, you know, some of you may know the challenges of collecting data at GitLab. It hasn't been easy, and there's some parts of the process that are confusing. But I did want to just talk about what metrics we think that we should be measuring success and failure for our stage. What do when we add a new feature, what is the data that we should always make sure that we absolutely add right away? And then how do we move faster or more efficiently, I should say, on defining the data, instrumenting it, and then making sure that it shows up in the dashboard and is visible to the team. So I created an epic that tracks all of our data collection and reporting issues. And I created this spreadsheet to start on a list of metrics that we are tracking or would like to track. And then I think I'm wondering what would be, maybe I'll just pause there and get some feedback on what I just said. Okay. So
and so we're still like having trouble with some of the snowplow metrics. Is that true?
Yeah, so essentially the process is a bit confusing because we add the instrumentation. So we add events to snowplow or usage ping, and then they have to make their way through the ETL process and into the database. And then there's another requirement that if it's related to our SMAU definition, which is stage monthly active users, that it has to make its way into their definition of that model. So that's something we might always need a data analyst help with, because they actually have to add it to, I don't remember what they call it, but they have to add it to their process to actually have it show up in those dashboards. So right now, the problem is, if you remember from our group conversation, Jason has shows SMAO usage in the chart. And then for us, we have to have a caveat that all our data is grossly understated, because we're really not including anything in that metric except for, I think it's just package registry enabled. So it doesn't include container registry enabled. It doesn't include any activity from any of the API or from the user interface as well.
Gotcha.
So the reason I'm asking is I'm trying to figure out for myself, like, when we think about our stage, when we think about what would make us feel successful, what data would you see that you could say, oh, we're seeing an increase in usage, we're seeing an increase in adoption? What's like the metric that we should come down to and say that's one of our KPIs? If we're doing well in that, we know that we're doing well overall.
I feel like the easy ones are ones that we've kind of already identified, where it's just like, are people creating packages, installing packages, and deleting packages? And those types of events, at least on the back end perspective now, are quite easy to add the tracking for. But we run into this issue of, how do we actually get that across all of these other departments to actually start showing up? So I think that's something that we should always try to include right away, is like events based on the behaviors that we implement. So like, you can create a package, we should add an event for that, for the specific package type even, maybe. I think a really interesting metric would be sort of like, for any given project, how much, like how often, or not necessarily how often, but are people continuously creating packages? Because I could see a lot of people, they create one package, like maybe for fun to see if it works, but that doesn't mean that they're using it regularly. We'd want to see if it's like in continuous use on any given project.
Yeah, I like that. We have one problem now where we can't track users. We really just know a count of events, which is problematic. So I'm wondering how we back into that. Like, are people doing it? We could look at it at just like a count of events, but I don't know if we could look at it by user or by instance. Maybe we could slice it by project or something.
If we are tracking on the UI, there we could at least see that definitely somebody clicked the page, or somebody clicked the button, or somebody accessed the details. And we could actually have different events for what is on the API and what is on the UI, and start measuring like 80% of our users use the API to do everything, and or 80% use the interface, or I'm inventing. I think maybe that will be valuable.
I like that. Yeah, I've been kind of thinking of it as like, we have these general adoption metrics, which is like, how many times did someone do a thing? How many times did someone, and like, what's the difference between the front end and the API? But then also, as we start to launch specific features, I'm interested in building like a behavioral analysis of those new features. So like, as an example, for the Docker expiration policies, like, we really want to know how many, like, we want a bunch of data for that particular feature. We want to know how many people enabled or disabled the feature. We want to know how many people changed the setting. We want to know how many times it was updated, for instance. And I think the idea of like building a feature and then thinking about the use case for that feature and then tracking a funnel through like those metrics would be really valuable. That's sort of the more advanced case that I would like to get to. And I'm sure Ian would love to see that data too when he's designing things.
Does anyone know how, so we've got like event-based metrics where it's like we're counting the number of times someone does something. And then we have something like the expiration policies, where maybe we want to see like, how many expiration policies have been changed from the defaults at any given time. That's something that we don't necessarily need an event to track. We just need a query. We can query the database and say, well, which, count how many no longer are matching the default, and then we can display that. Does anyone know, because I personally don't know, how queries like that can be added to dashboards or wherever. Like, is there a team that would handle that, or are we able to do that?
I don't know.
The data team, quality team would probably be the 2 points of call there. Data team is a little bit, they don't exactly have a huge team right now. I think they're pretty overloaded with a lot of the work they have to do. But the quality team, particularly Kyle Weavers, has been super helpful with a lot of extra queries. But in terms of how to implement it in code, that might be worth asking in development or something like that. I'm not exactly sure how to add it in code either.
Because I feel like that's the kind of thing where we could write the queries for that, and it's just a matter of like, who do we give them to so that they can end up on a chart somewhere.
The question I had too, like in terms of, okay, let's say, Steve, you had tracking for Conan and it goes through the system, it shows up in Snowplow. How do we get it added to the dashboard? Should I be responsible for that? It seems like we're not going to get the support from the data team to like continuously add metrics for us. So I'm wondering, should product developers, is that part of the process to like make sure that we add the data to the dashboard? Or should that be on me as the PM, or some combination of therein? The way I've seen it work in the past is that the PM usually maintains those dashboards and builds those. Not necessarily the developers, but I could probably use some help with my SQL refreshing. It's been kind of a while, so maybe we can collaborate on it for a few metrics, just getting the initial dashboard built, and then I'll be up to speed and I'll be refreshed on my SQL skills.
I'm going to guess based on my current access that PMs are maybe expected to manage the dashboards. Like I personally, like I cannot edit or manage Periscope dashboards. I can only view them.
Oh.
So that, I don't know if that's because I just haven't made an access request, or if that's on purpose. But that's kind of what
I think that might just be an access request thing. Okay, do you think it would be helpful for me to open the list of metrics and to go through them quickly in 10 minutes? Or do you think it'd be better to do that asynchronously?
I would say it's better to do async, Tim. And I'm happy to help out. I can do all the dashboard work, and I've worked with dashboards that we've already got. So I'm happy to like sit down and walk through this with you. Obviously, everyone's welcome to come and like be involved in that. It's not like a manage a PM type situation. It's just like, how do we get these dashboards set up so that they're useful for the team? So anyone's welcome to show up to that. And does that sound okay? Or
that would be awesome. Yeah, I think if we could just get a few reports up and running, and then I could take it and run. That would be really useful. There's still a lot of confusion for me. I met with the data PM and one of the analysts yesterday, and we're working on it, but there's still a lot of confusion about the process, for me at least.
Yeah, okay. Well, and I created all the dashboards. Well, I've created multiple dashboards for the team around our, our throughput and whatnot. So I've created them before. I sort of basically understand the process, I think, and I have the access to do it. So happy to help out.
That's awesome. Thank you. Well, we didn't, I think my original question was, what metrics do we think are really important? Like, how do we measure success? And it sounds like we're just saying, for now, we think that's overall usage. And then in the future, what we think would be really valuable is if we can use data to understand if a feature was successful or not, or if there were any problems or anything like that. And there are
Can we find out, like, if we are allowed to track things on the project level, even if it's just like a ratio of like, this many per project, not specifically, like this project has this many things. It's just more of a like an overall metric, because knowing our limitations in terms of what we are allowed to and not allowed to track in that way might be helpful.
With allow, you mean technically, or like we should or should not track?
No, yeah, I mean like the legality with user privacy.
I think that's fine, tracking at the product. I think there's a technical limitation that we can't currently track unique users, not that we can't track it, because I think any data we are tracking, people have opted into. I think it's more just the way that we're tracking the data, we can't tie it to a session or a unique user. It's all just like counts of events. But you might be able, and so that's the question, is like, can you tie events to a given project or instance or group? I'm not really sure. We could do some rough math and say like how many updates per project, but that doesn't really give you a sense of like what we're looking for in this case.
I think we'd want to, like, to me, I don't know if people feel like this is a scenario where for each of our different sort of categories, we have a different measure of what we deem to be success or failure, right? I mean, I think there'd be a general sense, right? Because if I can upload a package to NPM and download the package again, that could be one measure. But as a container registry, that doesn't necessarily encapsulate everything. So it might be worth like talking about specific services at some level. It might be easier to talk about the stuff we're actively using right now, and like NPM or Maven or container registry, particularly.
One thing I've been thinking about is like the success rate for each service. So like for the dependency proxy, we would want to know like the cache hit ratio. So like what percentage of images were ended up pulling from the dependency proxy versus ended up pulling from Docker Hub. And ideally we should see that number grow over time, like as the dependency proxy is in production. We should see more images being pulled from the cache versus not being pulled from the cache. For the container registry, sometimes I'm thinking, yeah, how many images are pushed, but also like how many images failed, how many errors did we, and like we're tracking page views to the container registry, but we're not tracking page views of 500 errors, for instance, or like where there was a Docker connection timeout. So like understanding the success rate of people trying to navigate to that page and failing, I think that could be a really useful early step. And probably the same for NPM and Maven, like attempts to publish versus failed attempts.
Yeah, I think the dependency proxy is an interesting one. What I'd be curious about is learning whether someone had a miss and then a subsequent hit, and how many, because if as I am constantly referring to different packages, I'm going to get a bunch of misses. And if I change them all the time, or I'm in early development and I'm switching dependencies and stuff like that, you might get a heap of misses. And then if I'm changing the dependency around, I'd see misses. This is probably an edge, but I'm kind of thinking along the lines of like, I'd want to know, we made a request for this to the proxy, it failed, it was a miss. We pulled down the dependency that we were trying to query, that we were trying to load, and then subsequently we got a bunch of hits. So it was the miss and then the hits that were useful and associated with the specific package. And I forget, I don't know actually how it's implemented right now, whether we have a org specific or a group, customer group project level specific cache, or whether if we're pulling down a version of a package that happens one time and then everyone, like say on gitlab.com, gets the same version because it's the same version, because they're uniquely described and they have to be.
I think it's at the group level right now. So if you pull something at the group level, it's available to everybody within that group. There is a problem though, because I really want that same information. I think that'd be really valuable. But again, we're really only counting events. So we really only know, like, we don't know that Dan, during your early development process, we're changing the dependencies a bunch of times. So everything was pulling manually. We really only know that out of everybody in this room right now, that there were 100 attempts to pull an image, and 20 of them pulled from the cache. And then we could look at that hit ratio over time, I think is what we could do now.
Can you explain a little more? So we have this idea of we can track events right now, but we want to track events within a state. Can you explain a little more, maybe like what use cases there are for that, or maybe like if there is a way we can take event usage and, you know, like make our way to being able to create some of those metrics? Because I feel like that's one thing I'm not seeing how that works necessarily.
How we go from, I just want to make sure I understood your question. So like how we go from a event count, like a count of events based, to like understanding how to actually tie it to a user or like actual behavioral data.
Yeah.
Where we know like Steve did this thing or a user did this thing. We have to change the way that we're doing data instrumentation. I think that was the idea behind Pendo, why we wanted to track that, because it gives you the ability to sort of track that user level information and session level information. But I don't think that we can do that in our current implementation. So it's something that the telemetry team is working through. I met with Sid yesterday, Sid Reddy, not Sid, our CEO, who's the PM for the data team. He's new. And he was saying that they're working through this. So they're, you know, in case everyone doesn't know, there was this issue where we tried to add Pendo to all GitLab instances. It didn't exactly go over well with our customer base. And so they've since then gone and come up with a plan for how this could work, how we could add this, and how it could make sense for our customers. And they're doing an internal review, and then they're going to run that by our sort of like customer advisory board or our user advisory board. I don't know which one it is. And then they'll work on actually adding this in, because this functionality is really important, because we are flying blind in terms of behavioral data until we get this. So that should be coming out soonish, but I don't think that they're going to rush it out. They want to really be careful. So that is really what we need to get to that level of data. So for now, I'm like, if we could just understand even just general trends, then when we have access to that data, we could start asking more intelligent questions about like, okay, well now think about zooming into the user level or to the instance level, and how do we make better decisions with data at that level.
Generally, and I would say that generally speaking, some of the more architectural / success level decisions are generally going to be in aggregate anyway. And one would hope they were in aggregate, because if we've only got enough users that we need to dig into specific users, that we might probably have a smell problem anyway. But using the aggregated data that doesn't have issues around GDPR and PII is I think in a lot of cases will be completely sufficient for us to at least have a directional sort of idea of what's being used and what isn't. So I don't think we should be considering this as sort of a blocker in any way to gathering enough data to help us start making better decisions around what's actually being used. I think I will leave it with the comment to say that was a very nice and very smooth explanation of what happened.
Thank you.
That's why I'm laughing. Good job.
Okay, so follow-up steps for me, I think what would be great is we have recently added a bunch of metrics. So Gigi, and I think Steve, you just are working on adding some metrics in now for the container registry as well. I think you have an issue assigned to you. And Nick, you're adding in some front-end tracking for the NPM and Maven installs. So maybe what our goal could be in 12.7, what my goal could be in 12.7 is to work with Dan to get those metrics added to our dashboard, and just as a team understand the process a little bit more and be able to bring to our team meetings at least the data that we have, and then we'll have better questions that come up. But also in general, I want to make sure that our list of metrics makes sense for us to track. So if we could do the asynchronous review and give any feedback in that spreadsheet, that would be really helpful. And if you see something that's missing that you think would be worth tracking, just add it yourself or comment or anything like that. That would be really helpful, because I want to at least have a roadmap to how we track all these metrics. So
What's the timeline for the async review, Tim?
Let's say in like I'll leave this up as an agenda item for our next Think Big session, maybe just as a reminder. So let's say 2 weeks from now. It's not urgent because I have enough dashboarding work that I could do in the meantime. But it will be helpful to get feedback by then. And I need to give everyone access. I realize. Sorry, just hoarding on my work. Okay. Sorry, Ian. We went 2 minutes over my allotted time, but I do want to make sure we leave time for the round robin review. So let's switch to that. Actually, thank you, everyone.
Sure. Yeah, we can go right up to the buzzer. It'll be great. We're going to do design round robin like we did last time, except this is version 2. For all of you, it's basically the exact same. For me, I'm going to be talking a lot less. So that's what we're going to do. Give me 1 second and I will share the actual design. For a quick overview, in case this is your first time, I'm going to spend minimal amount of time explaining the design and asking about where I want feedback. Then we do a turn-based approach. The turns are in the agenda, and you give 1 piece of feedback, and then move on to the next person. One of the big callouts is when you're done giving feedback, make sure to call out the next person so we can move around pretty quickly. Give me 1 second to find design. Can everyone see my design?
Yeah. And
Yes?
can we also
awesome.
take notes? Can people contribute to the notes in the document, please?
Please. So this is a package detail view. It is one of the most complicated views that we'll have because I'm kind of demonstrating a lot of different points. This is supposed to help users with the focus of troubleshooting a problem with a package. That seems to be a big priority that happens with our users. So I wanted to present the data in a way that was really digestible. End of overview, learning from last time. Steve, when you are ready, you are the first person to go. The hot pressure seat.
Not very much time. I think it's impressive that this package has had so many downloads despite only having 0 kilobytes of data. I'm curious about the dependence tag or tab. What is in there?
Theoretically, the dependence would be packages that use outside packages that use this package in order to build it. So this could be, if you're at an organization level, this could be the base package, and then somebody else includes that package in their other package. And so I just wanted to surface a way to see those kind of connections. For DevOps, it would be really useful for, say, how many times has this package caused a problem? Is a way to see that, or how big of an impact would a problem have with this package, things like that.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's cool. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that, which makes sense because if you're using open source, I don't think that would be possible or allowed for private packages. That's cool. I know that's not really feedback, but I will.
If you're not ready, you can.
Rest.
All right. Who's next? Tim, I believe.
Well, I'm trying to think of my feedback. I left you a bunch in Slack, and I'm trying not to look at it and cheat. Something I like. So I really like the add to project button is clear now. Instead, I think before it was like blue and green, and we iterated on it. I like that it's cleared. I like that design choice.
Awesome. Who's next?
Well, remember to call out the next person. This is Nico.
Yeah, it's me. I find it, I like the page, but I find weird that the warning is on top of the error message. So just scanning the core code, I get, oh, what's happening here?
Who's next?
Nick.
Yeah, so on the current packages page, we can delete, but we can't, there's no delete button on this page. Is that intentional?
No, it is not. I will need to address that. That is excellent feedback, Nick.
Okay, on to Daniel next.
For me, I find the placement of the NPM, the sort of detail information, and then the two warnings, and then the sort of tabs to be really kind of awkward to my eye. I'm a pretty awkward dude though, so maybe it's not awkward and I am. But yeah, the layout there seems a little weird. It's like an error sandwich. Yeah.
Hopefully, you would only ever see one if there was an issue, but it can get very busy for sure.
Yeah, and then over to João.
Yeah, I think that maybe it would be worth to have a separated tab for the history data, maybe with some graphics in there as well, to see the evolution of the number of tags pushed for a given package, along with the history for the pipelines and all of that, because if you are going to push everything to the front page, maybe it will be overwhelming. Yeah, Bailey.
Yeah, so Joan kind of took mine. But I think I would care, and generally I'd like maybe to see like the history and the usage data and the metadata maybe to be moved under the README, because that's, as a developer, that's where I want to look first, is, you know, just some like the README is like really the first thing I go for on most everything. So having that kind of be above the fold, I think would be a big benefit. And Steve is next.
When it comes to the description, is there really a description for the package, or would that kind of live within the README or within the project README? That's one thing I'm a little uncertain about.
So that's something I would kind of throw back on the technical standpoint. I believe some packages do have a metadata that is their description. I've also heard that they don't really get used that often. So it might be something that's just not worth surfacing. I'm not sure.
Well, that was my question too, is about the README and the description. Is like, where does that README come from? And is it editable here, or are we just pulling it in from the project?
I was planning on pulling it in from the project and leaving that editing and manipulation for the project level, especially because that can impact the different versions of packages. So I try to keep it as simple as possible.
But for the project README might be very different than the actual package README, right?
It could. It would be nice if we could default to a package README. I'm not sure if all of them include that as part of the package. We could explore that a little further. That's one of the questions I'll ask users when I do the validation, is whether or not this is ever going to be relevant, or if it's not particularly helpful.
Okay, I think Nico's up next.
So my feedback is about the tab additional information. So if the first thing that I see is, for example, file of version, I assume that anything that is on the right of the label is a number. And then I go to dependencies, like how many dependencies a triangle. And then if it's the first thing is like, if I see dependencies, because that's what I'm interested on, when I scan on the left, it's like, okay, files too, does it mean like warning? So I think it's a bit mixed, the concept.
Great, I'll look into that.
And Nick next.
I don't like the color of the graph. I don't like the red.
Fair enough.
Over to Dan.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to only echo that the page feels pretty busy overall. It's to me, there's like a whole lot of stuff, and then below the fold, there's other stuff that I'm not actively developing these days. So I look at it and just kind of go, okay, well, what else is down here? And so maybe you want me to be stoked about scrolling down the page. I'm not really sure, but I would want to see. Yeah, I think I would want to see the layout a bit differently, just for my usage, which I'm not sure is representative.
Okay.
Joel?
Yeah, I think I would move the description to the bottom of the title. like in the usual repos. And the metadata probably would be good to have it as some kind of labels or part text, because with a specific session for it, it looks a bit weird, but that may be just me. Haley?
What's under the verification tag, yeah, what's under the verification tab?
Under the verification tab, I have buried that I have not solved the verification problem yet. I don't know what is necessary for that for users. Is it a really grand process? Is it just an admin can check it? So first I want to explore the idea of, as a developer, this is useful. And then once I know it is, if it is, then I'll move into the verification and flesh it out. It could sit somewhere else, not in a tab, but I'm not sure what's involved. So that's why it's kind of buried.
Yeah, makes sense. On to Steve.
I am actually going to interrupt, even though I love that we're going to move forward. We got 2 rounds in 10 minutes. That is success. And Daniel is going to be really happy because we did it on time. Thank you. That was all really useful feedback. And we did it really quickly. So I feel like we got our efficiency down. Just like last time, I'm going to create an issue and ask that you give feedback on the round robin. The reason is, if it was useful or not useful, is other teams and other product designers want to know how we do it and implement it as well. So this could kind of ripple out. So your feedback is going to be really, really helpful. I'll post that into the Slack channel. And I'm done, Dan, for time.
Just quickly, can I ask a question? If I've got some more feedback that I want to add, can I just put that directly on the design? Is that the best place for it?
Yep, you can. The link is here in the agenda. I can also post it into this Slack channel if everyone wants it. It's the new design tab functionality from GitLab, so it's kind of cool to also get some feedback on how it works, and I can let the designer working on that know as well.
And I'm hoping you'll eventually add a MR for our team page to describe the process. That would be lovely.
I can do that.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This is awesome, and talk to you soon.